Hello and welcome to lesson 5 of week 4. In this lesson, we are going to talk about modules in JavaScript. My name is Mildred. Now, a module is a reusable block of code, like we have functions or variables or classes that we can export from one file and import into another file. And it helps us in organizing our code. We can split large projects into smaller files. We can reuse or import the same logic in different places, and we can maintain or isolate features in different separate files for us to be able to have better maintenance. And the only thing is that we will not be able to test this when we use our file system like this. It only works with HTTP or HTTPS protocol, which means that if we had this in an app or a server, then we'll be able to test this. So we're going to just understand the concept, and when we build our apps in an advanced course, you are going to see how it works. But your assignment requires you to work with modules, and so it is important to gain an understanding. So when we want to work with modules, if you see your HTML file, we have script source and we have the name of the file. But when you're working with module, you want to put script, and now the type attribute will be there, and now the type is going to be equal to module here, and then the source now will be your file name, like that. So it relies on this type attribute equal to module here for you to be able to work with that. All right, so when it will restrict us from using this because it's blocked by this. Can you see that? Because we need to use a protocol, it has to use your HTTP or HTTPS protocol for modules to work. So this our file protocol will not work. Now let's just work with modules. We have other modules that we use in older versions pre-ES6, but we're going to work with the ES6 since it is the modern standard. All right, so in ES6 we use the export and import keyword, and it is supported natively in browsers and also when we have Node.js when you want to use a framework. But when we look at the older modules before ES6, it uses the require and maybe module.export, but when you use Node.js, you realize that the old modules are still being used. So let's focus on the ES6 modules and use the export and import keyword since it is the modern one. There are two types of modules that we have, or two types of exports from a module that we do. We have the named export and then we have the default export. Now when we have the name export, you can export multiple things, but when you have a default export, you can export only one main value per file. How does this work? Let's say we have a new file here. We call this file math.js. We want to put mathematical functions in this file. So we use the export keyword because we want to use that. So we say export because we are going to include this on another file, import it on a file. So we want to get a constant pi. Let's say this is equal to, the value of pi is 3.14159, right? And then we want to have another one. We say export, and let's say we want to create a function, and this function will be called add. We want to just add two numbers, so we'll have a and b, and then in a pair of curly brace we want to return a plus b. All right, and then we want to export, let's do function subtract, and we want to subtract two numbers. We'll say a and b, and then here we'll return a minus b, like that. So let's say this math.js is a module because we have those export keyword here in front of everything. Now if we want to have like a logger, for instance, this one wants to have a default. So let's say we have something called logger.js here, and on this file we want to export, so we use the default keyword, export default. So we said that we can only have one main value per file, so this default is just going to be 1, so we export default function. If we want to log a message, so let's say the function is log, and we have a parameter called message, and then in a pair of curly brace we want to say this should always log in the console, so console.log. So this is for debugging purpose, console.log, and then say log, and we want it to log the message. So when we use this one on any file, we know that it will log a message to the console. So now we have two files that we have created, and we want these two files to be modules. So because you see here we have multiple named exports, but we only have one default export. So when we want to now import, let's say on our example.js file we want to use this pi, we want to use this add function and subtract function. So on the file where you want to use the module, you will use the import keyword. So what we are importing is what we put export here. Because it is named, we want to use a pair of curly brace, so we're going to be importing pi, and we want to import add too. So let's say we want pi and add here, so we'll say import pi as a comma separated list, add. We can even import subtract too. So we have subtract. So you can import everything, you can import only one thing. We're importing this from, and the name of the file is math.js. So we have math.js. All right. So you can say you're importing this from, let's say .math.js or like this. All right. And then once you import this from math.js, let's say we want to log to the console. So we'll say console.log. And what we want to log here now is, let's say, the value of pi. This is not going to log to the console because of our protocol. So this needs a protocol to actually log. So we have pi here, and then we can do the addition. So if you're working on a server, you can try this out and it will work there. But if you are going to be importing the log, for instance, because it's a default export, you don't use the pair of curly brace. See here, we use the curly brace to import this. But because we want to import the log here and it's a default log, we don't use the curly brace. We just say import log from the name of the file is logger.js. So you have to specify your directory or your path properly here, and then you want to log something. So if I say log message, the message I want to log here is hello and welcome. So this will now log that. So you can see how we import. The file where you want to use that function is the file where you use import. The function you want to use has a module, you have to use the export keyword there. So you can rename your imports. So like we imported this now and say import log, right? So you can say import log has message or something like that. So you can say import log and you can use the has keyword message. When you want to do this, you put a pair of curly brace, right? And this is not the default log that we are naming. Let's say for instance we want to import add as message or something. Okay, it's from the math. So you can use the pair of curly brace and use a hash keyword to alias the name of what you are getting out from there. You can import everything using the asterisk. So we can say import. So the math has pi, it has add and subtract. So we can just use all, the asterisk sign. So we want to import all. So we can say import all has math utils or something like that from the math.js. Alright, so you can do it like this. So all. So instead of putting a pair of curly brace, writing add, subtract, pi here, we can use the asterisk sign. Alright, so you can have combined default and name export in one file where you have just so like we have this logger here, we can have it there, but we can only have one default per file like that, since we can have several exports but just one default there. And when you want to import that here, so in the pair of curly brace you can import the named exports and then outside the default here. Okay, so you're going to import that like that. Alright, so sometimes you don't want to load all the modules immediately, and you can use the import to returns a promise for lazy loading. And for this we use like the assign keyword to declare an asynchronous function and the await keyword to pause the execution of the assign function until the promise is settled. So it's either resolved or rejected. And it's just like, let's say for instance I have this file called, let's say I have a module.js file and I have assign function. So use the assign keyword. Let's say I want to load module like this, and here I want to use, let's say constant module will be equal to await. So now we're going to be awaiting the import, and here we're importing math.js. We can now do console.log module. Let's say add, we want to add 5 and 10 to give us 15. So this is just an example of that. And so we do load module because that is the name of the function like this, all the function. So we can do this dynamic import like this. So we can import this way. So the execution rules for module is that each module is executed only once and then is cached. All right. So this is where we end this lesson. Thank you and see you next week.